Welcome, everybody, to Catholic Owned Live. Thank you so much for joining us for this special edition of the Monday Show. I'm your host, Brooke Joyner, and Catholic Owned Live is a show where we talk honestly about faith, work, vocation, and what it really takes to build the new Catholic economy. Now, normally the Monday show, you see me here just by myself, but today we have a special guest. We have Liam Collins, the founder of Human Centered Tech, with us. Liam, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So, before we jump in, I want to give a little overview on human centered tech for our audience. So, human centered tech is a software consultancy that transforms ambitious ideas into production ready applications. The firm is founded on technical excellence and human centered values. And of course, Liam, you are the founder.
I should say co-founder. I have a partner, Thomas Doyland, who helped me stand this up 3 years ago.
Beautiful. Okay, well, there you go. The other thing, Human Centered Tech has a couple special relationships with us at Catholic Owned. First, they were a booth sponsor at the Catholic Economy Forum 2026. And then, second, Liam and his team are the team we've chosen to partner with to rebuild the all new Catholic owned platform. So much to get into, Liam, but I would love to share a little bit of background and overview about your company so that the audience knows a little bit more about that. So tell us about a little more about you and the business.
Yeah, of course. And by the way, speaking of Catholic economy, I'm here at the Ora et Labora co-working space in Colwich, Kansas. Catholic co-working space. So if you join us, you can come out and pray morning prayer with us or eat lunch with us, which is what's about to happen. So there may be
Amazing.
a little bit of background noise, but you can perhaps bear with it in the knowledge that it's happy Catholics enjoying their midday. Yeah. So um, okay, about the company. Well, okay. I was homeschooled K through 12. I always liked math and science. Um, kind of, I guess, oriented towards engineering. Went to Thomas Aquinas College. Spent the 4 years there, of course, doing their great books, liberal arts curriculum. Learned, I would say, to think in a little bit more of a humanistic, broader sort of became steeped in the Catholic tradition. Um, and then wound up deciding after all of that, after really thriving there, loving it, loving philosophy and theology, wound up deciding that I wanted to get a second degree in aerospace engineering. So I went and did that. Got the formal training as an engineer. Went and worked for the U.S. Navy for a couple of years as an aerospace engineer, and then basically kind of realized I didn't really want to move at the speed of the federal government, and that I maybe wanted to kind of bring these two sides of my background or my interests together. Engineering on the one hand, and sort of um, uh, I don't know, the human, the desire, and maybe to some degree the ability to think about human thriving and what makes for a good human life, what makes for good technology in the first place. Um, so, and then I sort of had this third desire, which was just to be self-employed, to start a business, to be. I like to say entrepreneurs are the cowboys of the 21st century. We, we live maybe a little bit more of a, and you know this, Brooke, of course. We live a little bit more of a risky, sort of on the edge, but potentially also more rewarding lifestyle, I would say, than your average W-2 job. So partnered up with Thomas Doyland, who was another very skilled programmer, also Thomas Aquinas College grad, formed Human Centered Tech, and kind of, we have and do have, and we can get into this more in the live stream, but had some sort of high level aspirational views about technology, what makes good technology, about data ownership, about sensor resistant technology, things like that. And really ultimately about sort of the governance of the internet and what the next evolution of the internet should look like. But in the short term, it was like, okay, we want to be entrepreneurs, we want to be self-employed. We got to feed our family. Well, I had to feed my family. Thomas is now married; he has his first on the way. But at the time, it was just me who had to feed a family. He had to feed himself. And the question was, what can we do that we can go it on our own and start doing. And we basically just started taking contracts. We did some work for a couple of health tech startups, some commodities market analysis, some robotics work, some IoT work, some GPS data analysis for Morningstar, which is the largest harvester of domestic tomato crops. I would say at heart we have a sort of desire to help your everyday American, your blue collar, hardworking, just wants to serve people, but maybe hasn't been seen or heard in terms of the technology that's available and out there. That's definitely a passion. But yeah, it's kind of like initially it was just like whatever we could do for whoever would. I used to joke that our subject matter was anything that was within the bounds of Catholic morality that can be accomplished on a computer. And we're sort of slowly narrowing that, and we're very happy to be working with Catholic Owned to build your platform. Excited about that, and excited in general about projects that aren't just technology projects that could make money, but also projects that maybe move us sort of in a larger ideological direction that we want to go.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the human-centered technology is, today even more relevant than 3 years ago, right? I love that you hit on the data ownership side, because we have so much alignment there. I know we've spoken about in building our platform, in the beginning, in our original, we were so serious about not tracking our users almost to a fault because of that commitment to not be tracking people. But also for the business case, there's a certain amount of that type of stuff that we can do. And you guys have helped us see that, there are ways you can ethically monitor things. But just having that point of view and that perspective is so valuable when you're talking about a business owner or a larger business or a nonprofit selecting a tech partner. The data is one of many important considerations.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and it's something I think, as you say, that people are becoming more aware of. And you sort of had, I remember when Google Maps first rolled out, and it was like, and people were thinking about it in terms of privacy at the time. And I remember thinking, if they're going to analyze my map data and use it to make this Maps application better, I'm kind of okay with that. It doesn't necessarily seem like it has to be a private thing. Like it used to be, if you lived in a small town, people knew which side of town you were on because the town talked to each other, right? Like it's not necessarily private. But then I think what's become more obvious as time has gone on is that there's value in this data, first of all, and so you shouldn't necessarily just hand it over to just anyone. And secondly, it can be used for a lot of different purposes, and it can amount to a kind of surveillance over your whole life. And so now I think you kind of have two poles. You have, on the one hand, sort of like the Microsofts of the world that they want everything they can possibly get, right? It's like almost spyware, even Windows at this point. And then on the other hand, you sort of have like your Linux user, libertarian type person who wants everything to be open source and locked down, and they don't want to share any data. And as you say, there's power in the data. I don't think that siloing it all ultimately can win, because I think there's too much value in sharing the data. But I also think that we don't necessarily want to just share it to sort of the biggest kid on the block, the most forceful aggregator, whoever that may be, who sort of uses it for their own for-profit motives. And that's something I think is important for us as Catholics to be thinking about: is how do we get organized, and how do we use the data that we generate together for our mutual benefit, and of course for the good of the world at large, but in a way that really respects the data creators and really moves us towards good things and not towards evil things. I think that's something we need to be thinking about.
Right. Yeah. And just to give kind of folks a very simple use case, like why, as Catholic owned, what is a valid reason I would want to know, what product you clicked on? And it's clearly, so I can recommend a related or also relevant product. And kind of the counter argument to that is, well, I can choose for myself. but at the same time, it's like, let us help you, right? So there's a customer service case to be made. There's that user experience case to be made. And as you said, the people who are collecting the data, as Catholics, well, really anyone collecting data has such, I would almost say, a sacred responsibility and stewardship over that data. And having is really, really important. So that's a big one. And then the other people, there's two other main things that I really appreciate about human centered tech and the approach. One of them is in regards to the labor and the workers and how, incorporating efficiency with technology with the people you choose to hire and work with. Can you tell us a little about your perspective on that and how that kind of shapes the way that you work?
Yeah, well, it sort of touches on this larger question of what it is even to be a Catholic business, right? Which is, that could be a series of podcasts or live streams in itself. But fundamentally, like any business should, we want to act with integrity, right? We want to follow through on our promises and be honest and be upfront and communicate well, understand the needs of our clients well. Those things are important to the business. I wouldn't say that human-centered tech, as such, would refuse to ever hire a non-Catholic or something like that. But it does happen to be that most of the people that I know are Catholic, first of all, and definitely most of the people that I know that I trust to have the kind of integrity that I was just describing are Catholic. Well, and honestly, I mean, the other thing for me is the network via Thomas Aquinas College is really great. And a lot of my fellow graduates have a really analytical way of thinking that applies well to software development without necessarily, having been trained and come up through, the ranks of the FANG companies or whatever, where they're now, expecting a certain way of doing things and a $250,000 salary. And so I guess that's one aspect of it is trying to work with good people who will collaborate well, understand our mission, and collaborate well with clients. And then the other aspect, which maybe you're kind of hinting at, is the whole AI world and thinking about how to use that in a human way. A couple thoughts on that. One is I will say that anytime there's an industrial revolution, you're going to have some turnover, right? I think everybody recognizes that. And there are certain industries that don't exist anymore, right? And there's just nobody employed in, I don't know. Well, maybe there are a few people employed in something like basket weaving or whatever, right? But it's artisanal, right? It's not the mainstream. So I think, maybe there are parts of technological development that will go that way. But I also think, well, first of all, I think if you are involved in that, you should be humane about it and not just sort of lay everybody off and expect them to move their families at the drop of a hat, like across the country, to find a new job or something. But I also just think it's a non-issue for me because AI really opens up so many new possibilities. We're looking to do more. I think you can kind of take it and say, well, great, we can replace people, or you can say, we can take the talented people that we have and they're willing to learn new things and try new things, and we can just accomplish way, way more and things that we never could have dreamed of accomplishing before. And that's very much the approach of human-centered tech. Is like, we want to employ as many people as we can, actually, and we think we can just accomplish way more for way more people. So.
No, definitely. I do think that, I think just like the classic example of technology sort of diminishing an industry, I feel like the printing press is just like the easiest, because people used to just have to sit there and write. That was their job, right? Writing copies of books, or I don't even know what it was, to be honest, Liam. And then, the physical print industry going digital, right? Like Microsoft Word being, so people type, was it called typists? Was that the ladies they were typewriters to print books?
Okay. Yeah. I don't know the particular history there. Well, there's the interesting wrinkle in all this, right? Which is Jevons paradox, which is that there's lots of examples like I always think of the one with slavery, which was a sad example. After the cotton gin was invented, people thought that maybe that would diminish slavery in the South because there would just be less need for slaves to do cotton. As it turned out, the average slave then became so much more productive that there was actually increased demand for slaves. So we had to fight a civil
Mm,
war. It did not technology did not solve that problem. But
interesting.
bank tellers are another good example, right? They thought after ATMs happened that there would be less bank tellers, and as it turned out, actually, what happened was there were more bank tellers because there were more banks and more bank branches, and you still needed a human to do certain things, and so the demand for bank tellers actually went up. And I assume that's probably true about print too. That the total
Mhm.
number of people employed, in general, in some kind of conjunction with printing books, is probably more than it was, even
Mm.
though we have easier ways of mass producing books and of typesetting books and all these things. Maybe one of the big counter examples in my mind is farming, right? I think it was like 54% or 60% or something of American families were involved in agriculture, basically, as of less than 100 years ago, and now it's like 4 or 5% or something like that. Uh, so I guess both things can happen. Maybe
Mhm.
it depends to some degree on how constrained. Like you really only need so much food at the end of the day, versus
Right.
as for I mean, I think we're far, far away from the upper limit of the demand for software as of right now, because there's so much
Yes.
software is just it's just logic at the end of the day, and there's
Mhm.
a lot more logic that could be done in human society at this point in various ways.
Right. Well, and I really appreciate that you touched on sort of the humane way of approaching, because a common argument is like, oh, well, AI is taking jobs. And I think that the larger companies who also are the biggest offenders on the data theft and sale, and so there are patterns that go with these types of organizations, is they laid off a whole lot of people and created real problems for families. And of course, we don't want to diminish that. You and I, we both are family people providing for families. And I know for a fact that both of us have made tremendous sacrifices to, for on behalf of others in order to provide those services we provide. So we certainly don't diminish that. I can see how what you're saying, approaching that in a humane way, and rather than eliminating roles, it's empowering the people you have to do more. I feel like that is such a proper orientation, on the question of AI as a tool, in any business, rather than cost cutting. It's what more can we achieve.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's just so much we can achieve, and there have been a lot of things that people said that machines would never be able to do, and many of them machines have now done. Right, so it's one has to be careful in sort of staking a claim as to what machines are incapable of. But one thing I'm absolutely certain machines are incapable of is taking responsibility. Right, at the end of the day, you can't blame the computer. There's some person must take responsibility for what happens. It may be that they didn't foresee it correctly, or I'm not saying that accidents aren't possible, but um, I think that one of the sort of major currencies in this coming economy will be leadership and the willingness to take responsibility, and you need people for that. And so, to me, it's like, can I find people who are responsible, who are good leaders, who care about the right things, and then can I put the most powerful tools in their hands that I can possibly get my hands on?
Mhm. Well, and especially when we're talking, the tools that you're creating are really enabling businesses to operate well, to fulfill on their service promises. And that is such an important part of a Catholic economy, right? In that, we want to be creating jobs for fellow Catholics. We want to be creating value for our customers. Um, but at the same time, we're competing with large players who take advantage of economies of scale that we just simply cannot. And so I
Not
really
yet.
just, not yet, right? Exactly, exactly. Um, I really appreciate that. And I think so that's kind of on the builder, the business side. But I really do have sort of a tender affection and, an empathy and a sympathy for um, certain sectors who are overwhelmingly affected by AI kind of being misused. I would say a misuse of AI is for the creation of art, for the creation of writing, you know, um, prose and story. And um, I really see a responsibility on the side of the consumer, the person who is buying that art, the person who is choosing to use AI for writing instead of, reading a real book or hiring a real writer. You know what I mean? Um, that's where I really have just a sensitivity for people because I spoke to an artist, he's a well known artist in the Catholic world, and he shared with me that for the artist, the production of the art is like a big part of their own spiritual journey. And I think probably the same thing could be said for writers. I can say that for myself for sure. And when we choose to consume that AI sort of rip off of that, we're robbing the artist of that part of their life. And I think that's so important. And so I am, we use AI. We're not against AI, but there are certain places where I see the consumer has a responsibility, and this is where Catholic Owned comes in humanizing the transaction again, in saying, and I think you said it and someone else said, maybe we can't be as fast as Amazon, but maybe there's some virtue there that we as the buyer can develop of, I'm going to wait the 4 hours. It's okay. you know, that we need to remember there are people behind this and to choose to do business with people rather than this transactional, robotic, void of any meaning exchange.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think there's a thirst for that. I haven't fact checked this, but a buddy of mine told me at one point that there was a study done that found that you actually literally digest your food better if you know where it was grown, which I think is really interesting and kind of a good metaphor. Um, I think it's fair to say that we have more and more material stuff, um, but there's maybe less or at least more of a thirst for meaning. I don't just want a bunch of stuff. I want valuable stuff and stuff that I love and stuff that was crafted with love and stuff that unites me to my fellow man. Um, those things all matter to me. I mean, that's kind of like part of branding, right? It's like that's why you have Nike shoes or whatever, and people care about that. It makes you part of something. Um, and we could be a little bit thoughtful about what we're part of, and we could take pride in what we're part of, and because it's not just about like getting the thing done. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you just need a hammer to bang a nail into a wall or whatever. But I mean, we see all the time, like what car people drive or what clothes they wear. These things are not just the utility of the thing; it's also part of their identity. And I think having an identity that's tied up with people who we love and people who care about the same things we care about is a fulfilling way to live life. And I would also say on the AI art point, I actually have an article on my Substack. The title is "Why AI Will Never Create Truly Great Music," which is a risky claim because of the previous point about how machines have done a lot of things, and I'm sure AI probably will create at some point some popular, or maybe already has created some very popular music, and maybe a case could be made that by the fact that it's popular, it is in fact great. But I don't think it's great. I don't think it will stand the test of time. And the argument there is that it's because there's a kind of attention to detail. AI imitates patterns, right? But part of what makes great art is not just the pattern; it's the divergence from the pattern, and that happens at a lot of different levels of detail. It may be at the broadest spectrum of the art, and it may be in very minute things. And I think most great art is both. People will say that movie was so good because the plot was so good, but then also like the costume down to the buttons on the coats or whatever was so cool, and like I often say to people who want to write, like, they want to write emails to people with AI. It's like, why are you doing that? Because if I can prompt in one sentence, then the rest of the thing is redundant. So you're wasting my time because you gave it one sentence and now I have to read a paragraph, but there's only one sentence of what you want to say to me in there. So what's going on? And so I think in a sense that AI art is actually kind of a waste of our time. It's not even just sort of a moral thing that we should avoid. And I mean, there are ways to use AI as an instrument, just as there are ways to use. I remember when synthesize. Well, I don't remember. I've read articles about when synthesizers first came out. There were people, sort of music purists, who were saying maybe we shouldn't use synthesizers. Maybe they do too much, right? If you have a button and you press it and it sounds like a whole orchestra, maybe that's bad. And it's like, well, no, they're an instrument, and there's probably something lost. You don't have all that human attention now to creating that sound, right? Of 300 orchestral musicians, you just have one person pressing a button. There's probably something lost there, but there's probably also something gained and made possible that wasn't before, right? My brother in high school used to play things as if they were a whole orchestra in our living room. And couldn't have done that at 15, right, without synthesizers. So maybe people will find human ways to do certain really interesting things with AI, but I still think you have to remember that it's limited, and there's an attention to detail at all levels of detail that can't be done there. And so, yeah, I tend to find it actually hard to read like AI prose, for instance. I literally just get bored because it's too predictable. I know what's coming, and therefore there's not enough surprise and not enough new information to keep me interested. So anyway, I think it's both a moral thing and a sort of aesthetic thing that makes it not so worthwhile.
Yeah, the care and the taste, they can never imitate that. And like you know what I've been noticing lately is on YouTube videos. If they use a AI to write the script, I can tell immediately, and I immediately comment as such and move away. There's one creator who used to be so great, and on his second channel now, he's using AI for every script, and it's like I'm just unsubscribing because it's not the same. It's not the same. And so that care and that taste, I think, is missing in AI created stuff for sure.
Well, and the other piece, like you said, is there's a sort of there's an artistic process, right? And I think part of what people are trying to get out of is sort of this time spent attending to these little details, fitting what they want to say into the rules of English grammar. And I played violin. I still play the violin, but I played a lot from
Oh,
like
do
age
you?
6 to age 18. Yeah, and I was in an Irish folk band. By the end of high school, I was playing about 20 hours a week. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
I've
yeah.
always wanted to learn the violin, Liam. If I play the piano, but if I ever learn another instrument, it will be the violin.
It's
I've been
awesome.
saying that for like 2 decades.
I came to really appreciate it over time. When I was a kid, my dad played the classical guitar very well, and I used to think, oh man, I shouldn't have done violin. I should have done classical guitar. But as I got older, I came to really be grateful for the violin. And,
It's so cool.
but there's time spent playing the violin it's a little bit boring. It's a little bit repetitive. It's like I've got to practice this same shift from first to fifth position 50 times just to get it in tune, or 100 times, or and you think, like, do you really have to do that? Is there some way we could get rid of that part and just keep the artistic expression part? But one problem there is that some of that sort of repetitive, sort of almost pedantic stuff that you have to do is part of what gets you into the artistic mindset, and almost like a spiritual space, right? Um, it's why like musicians care about like their case, and their warm up routine, and they want to drink tea when they're getting ready for their folk concert or whatever. Like that's all part of the thing of sort of getting your soul and your spirit in a certain disposition. That is what creates really the pinnacle of art. And so I think even if we could sort of cleanly remove all the repetitive, boring, non-artistic stuff and just keep the artism, I think maybe it would still actually deplete the value and goodness of the art.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely, because it's in the mastering of the craft that the craftsman is really made, right? I think about even musicians from years ago that our parents listened to, the work that they had to do to get there. Um, it's just way more than we could imagine, I think, in a lot of sense. So yeah, there's true value in the mastering of the craft. And so yeah, I think it's important to have these types of conversations, and rather than just siloing, like you were saying, of AI is perfect or it's totally evil and we should there's nuance to it, and there's ways to use it to advance human potential in a way that honors the human dignity of the people using it. um,
I will say in the software world, there is a lot of repetitive, boring stuff that we used to have to do that really was repetitive and boring. Some guys enjoyed doing it, but I really think we were kind of conforming a lot of very talented human beings to the machines versus conforming the machines to us. And so that's very exciting to me because I'm not taking a one line prompt and asking a human being now to read two paragraphs, right? I'm taking a one line prompt and asking a machine to interpret what would have had to be two paragraphs before. And maybe it doesn't come out perfectly right, but I test it and I discover there's one other thing that I have to fix or whatever. But I don't now have to painstakingly go and write all of that by hand. And I think that's a huge gain. I think in the long run it should free up human talent and attention for more human things than trying to manipulate these machines to do what we want them to do. So I'm very happy to be using AI as a coder. I think it's fantastic, and it's enabled us to do things. For instance, on this Catholic Owned platform project that just would have been a lot harder and slower, 2 years ago. So
right, exactly. Yeah, using it as a tool to get to the serving of people in a faster timeline is, I think, a perfectly just use of it. And no, it's great. And that's one reason, obviously, of many, that we chose to work with you guys. So thank you so much for all of your hard work on Catholic Owned. Truly, it's looking so good. And I
I'm
just
excited about it. I told you know Brooke knows Joe Frola, who's been the lead developer on that project, and we were talking about it the other day, and just saying it's going to be really exciting to see that platform hit. I think because uh, not to be too self congratulatory, but I think we've done a good job, and I think it looks elegant. I'm sure we'll learn things as we roll it out, but I think it's going to do a lot of things well, and I think people are going to enjoy it, and I think it's filling a niche that is needed, and so I really there's different levels of excitement for different projects that we work on. I, I I would try not to work on a project that I truly didn't care about, but this is one that I really do care about, and I think it's going to be really cool. So,
yeah, yeah, it really is. What you guys have managed to accomplish from the inputs you were given is, not to be too self-deprecating, but
I
it's
was going to say you had a vision to be sure, but
but it's truly what you guys are building is finally, and I say finally because we've been wanting it to be this way for so long, finally doing justice to the vision. And that is so beautiful and wonderful, and we're just so grateful that you saw the vision and you took it even further than we could have even imagined. So it's an honor to be working with you, and I just can't wait for everyone to see the whole thing. Just a couple more weeks to go, right?
yep. Crunch time.
and,
Got to cross the
and
T's and dot the I's here.
we better wrap it up there because neither one of us will be sleeping for the next 2 weeks. We gotta get back to work on the platform. But thank you so much, Liam, for being my guest today and for being a big supporter of us at Catholic Owned. It means a lot.
Likewise, great to talk to you.
Awesome. And thank you to our audience for joining us for this special edition of Catholic Owned Live. If you need a technical product built for your business, whether that be an internal tool, I know you guys do internal tools as well, or something public facing, reach out to humancenteredtech.com. They have the contact us form, or reach out to me. I'll get you in touch with Liam. They're an amazing, amazing tech company to bring your vision to life. I will be back here for Catholic Owned Live on Friday. There's no Wednesday show this week, so be sure to tune in on Friday at noon Central Time to Catholic Owned Live, the show where we talk honestly about faith, work, vocation, and what it really takes to build the new Catholic economy. I'm your host, Brooke Joyner, and I hope to see you on Friday. Until then, God bless you. It takes us a minute, and then it will